Hey everyone, what's up? This is Uri for Guerrilla Poker, and in this video I'm going to be weighing in on a debate that's been at the center of the poker world forever and recently came up on Twitter as well, which is a version of the GTO versus exploitative poker debate. To kind of frame the subject in short, GTO poker is shorthand for game theory optimal, and it usually refers to someone who tries to play very, very technically accurate, very balanced. If you were to make a martial arts metaphor, this is someone who every punch he throws, he's making sure it's not predictable which direction he's coming from, how strong he's going to do it, he's going to protect against his opponent's counterplays, etc. And this is a strategy which, when executed perfectly, is pretty much unbeatable. On the other hand, exploitative poker means that you're looking for weaknesses in your opponent rather than trying to make yourself unpredictable. You're trying to find the other guy's patterns and exploit those, hence the word exploitable. In the context of the martial arts metaphor, maybe your opponent has a slight limp or he sees less well with his left eye or whatever, and so you tilt your attacks to go from that direction to take advantage of his weaknesses, and don't really worry about your own weaknesses unless he's aware of them and capable of doing something about it. I'll show you guys some background and we'll get into my opinion on the subject. So Phil Galfond recently tweeted, "I'm at the bottom of my range, so I have to bluff. Are you playing Linus Love or Barry Sweet heads up? No? Then you don't have to bluff. You should only bluff if you think it's more profitable than checking and losing. It's really that simple." Now, this is actually an exploitative thought process, and what Phil Galfond is saying is that rather than be worried about, being predictable or unpredictable, if you're not playing against the top guys in the world who are able to realize this and take advantage of it, that's not the direction you should be thinking of, but you should rather be looking for your opponent's weaknesses, and if you find them, which means if you think you have an opinion about bluffing or checking, then go for it that way. That's a better, more practical direction to think about things. Now, Doug Polk replies to this and he says, "That's just bad advice. Force yourself to bluff optimally and take what's yours. If they call, that's fine. Print EV. Normalizing giving up is how you become a weak losing player. Suck it up and fire that final bullet." Now, this is more of a game theory optimal, a GTO perspective, where Doug is saying, if you're bluffing the optimal frequency, you're unbeatable. So just do that and don't find excuses to play weak. And as long as you do that, you can't lose, so don't worry about it. If your opponent's calling, fine, your value bets win more, you're not bluffing too much, so you should be alright. Now, the interesting thing about this debate, maybe we'll add another guy who has an opinion on this. That's Charlie Carroll, who I was recently on a podcast with, which if you haven't, you should check out. He just says, fuck GTO. And he's a very, very exploitative poker player, but unlike Phil Galfond is very well versed in theory as well. I think Charlie takes it to a much more extreme place and makes theoretically bad plays and gets his opponents into leveling wars and, same type of thing, but he's taking it a lot further. The interesting thing is that both Phil Galfond and Doug Polk, and to a lesser extent Charlie Carroll, have all had a ton of success with their different styles in poker. Doug Polk was the #1 heads-up poker player in the world, online for a while, and I'm sure he's still a very, very strong player. And Phil Galfond, I don't know his exact accolades. I know that, he beat everyone in the Heads Up PLO Challenge years after he was not a full-time player anymore. And back when he was a full-time player, he was certainly one of the top 6 max and Heads Up players in PLO and possibly in No Limit Hold'em. I'm not actually familiar enough about his history that far back. But yet, different approaches, and both or all three have had a ton of success. So what should this imply to you guys when you're thinking about how should I study, how should I improve, which approach should I take, etc. And I can say, as someone who works with a lot of high-stakes poker players, all the approaches work. Like, they really all work. As long as you understand poker better than the guys you're playing against, you're good. So if you look at Doug Polk's approach and he says, do everything perfectly balanced and print EV, it's true. If you do everything very, very balanced and your opponents don't because you're better at it than they are, you're better at understanding the ranges, the strategies, the sizings, the situations, and all these things, you're going to win. Alternately, Phil Galfond is saying, if you understand your opponent's range and strategy better than he does, because to think that someone is going to call you too much, you need to understand what's going on better than he does. You're also going to win. And these things are both true as an approach, right? As long as we start out with a starting point, and that's the tough thing with learning from these really super talented players. Poker is an athletic sport in a way. It's a kind of mental sport. And as long as you're understanding ranges and understanding dynamics and strategies and the situation better than the other guy, you can go at it from an exploitative approach or you can go at it from a GTO approach, and they're both going to work. The main thing is, understanding it better than the other guy, right? And I think that's a key thing whenever we look at this GTO versus exploitative approach, to say, you can keep bluffing into the calling station and still be a great player. You would be a better player, you'd have a better win rate if you recognized he's a calling station and stopped bluffing. And vice versa, you can not understand theory and, wing your sizings and miss all sorts of concepts and not be balanced and still win even against the best players in the world if you're, smarter than they are in a way. But the more you understand, the easier it's going to be for you, and the more you're capable of just sitting back and implementing a balanced GTO strategy, the easier things are going to be, because you can always fall back on that and pick your spots very, very well in terms of where you want to get out of line in any way. So my approach definitely trends more towards exploitative, but also backed up with a lot of theory knowledge. It's just practical, and there's also this difference between heads up and 6max and MTTs, which isn't often talked about. And I think it's not a coincidence Doug Polk's approach comes from a heads up background, because implementing game theory optimal is very complicated. And in heads up, there are only two positions, so it's the simplest in a way. Like, there is the least amount of implementation you need to do. Whereas 6max, there is more. And MTTs, there's even more, not only because it's 9max and antes and more multi-way, but also because the stack to pot ratio changes and you have ICM considerations. So you just have a million more situations. And then kind of the nature of things is that heads up players tend to be a lot more technically accurate than 6max players, and 6max players tend to be a lot more technically accurate than MTT players. And kind of the GTO versus exploitative shift, I would imagine, as an MTT player, you want to focus more on exploitative, and as a heads-up player, you want to focus more on GTO. But always you should be thinking about both, in my opinion, and that's always been my approach. Like, to understand the theory, to know how to implement it, but my main focus is always on finding mistakes and how to take advantage of them. But like I said, as long as you're smarter and better and faster and more studied, more organized, all these, traits that help you succeed really in any field, and of course poker is no exception, you're going to do fine with both. For low stakes, certainly exploitative would work better, but you have to be good at it, right? And I think what Doug is implying is the thing Phil Galfond is saying may be used as an excuse to play weak tight, which many low stakes players do. So yeah, I think any direction you go is good. I prefer a combination of both. If you want to hear more about that, I have a course showing the approach for sale on Upswing Poker. There is a link in the description. Either way, hope you guys enjoyed the video and found my take on the debate somewhat interesting. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments. Keep in mind, many ways to climb the same mountain. All these guys are crushing their games, so you have to take this in context of these guys are all winning. So something to be said for every approach. And yeah, like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys next time.